Watch this.
Do you have a grade school or high school high achiever who maybe needs more educational challenges outside of school, and you want the school to pay for it? Well, one Idaho lawmaker might have a bill just for you. 3 years after wearing masks in public was a thing, a bill to stop those things, those policies to prevent the spread of disease from ever happening again, is one step closer to becoming a reality. If history is indeed written by the victors, well, then you couldn't be blamed if you didn't know about the River Massacre, the deadliest attack on Native Americans in U.S. military history, and it happened in Idaho. Idahoans put education as the top priority for legislators. It has taken the #1 spot for all 9 years of the Boise State Public Policy Survey. What schools teach, what they pay the teachers, and how well it's all funded, well, the funding part is constitutionally mandated. That'd be the basics anyway. And sometimes lawmakers like to throw in a few extras, like think Empowering Parents program and the Idaho Launch program. Well, the money for those programs, that all comes from different buckets of the general fund and of the budget. But what if local school districts could cover the cost of education beyond their classroom? Today, the Senate Education Committee introduced a bill for self-directed learners. That's what they're calling it. Students who demonstrate a mastery of knowledge through their grades. They're motivated. They have the ability to establish post-secondary career and educational goals. And, well, Hunter Funk looked into this. And if we understand this correctly, Hunter, teachers are the one who are designating the students that would qualify for these programs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And currently there is an Idaho law for self-directed learners. Now, these are middle and high school students who demonstrate a mastery of knowledge through their grades, are motivated, have the ability to establish post-secondary career and education goals. Teachers are the ones to designate the students, and former Senator Stephen Thane brought forth the amendment today. Now, the bill allows these self-directed learners to get financial support for alternative learning activities. The current statute doesn't allow districts to reimburse families for these expenses. This change lets teachers and families work together. Now, Thane worries schools will hurt if they don't pay for it.
And I believe unless we allow flexibility back into the public school system, that they will continue to struggle, and they won't be able to compete.
Now, this isn't asking for additional funding, but it would be paid for through the current state funding for schools. Thane argues it keeps schools competitive by allowing students to do outside activities like going to a math teacher because they're more advanced in their classes, maybe taking a piano lesson instead of band, or field trips, internships, and community service. It leaves it up to the school districts to figure out what the policies are. Now, there was concern how much this would pull from the funding for rural schools, and concerns that this would allow kids to take trips to Lagoon and get it paid for. So the argument is that districts could decide what is allowed and what's not allowed, though here's the turn. They all decided against it, with more against it than for legislators moved to hold the bill in committee. Nearly 3,600 students, though, in Idaho are considered these students.
See, there's a lot of these ideas flying around. Everybody's got this idea of how we can spend the state's money when it comes to education. But the concern, I think, that they brought this up was school districts get a pot of money.
Yeah.
And if they choose to use that, we all know they're stretched thin, what if they don't have any money left over for these extra activities? Then what? That's kind of the concern, right?
Right. It's then you can't give it out.
Does.
But since it's up to the districts, they would have been the ones to determine, hey, we can't do this year. But again, that puts it on the district, and then parents have to deal with that too.
Again, this is the whole education thing. And again, everybody's got these ideas of how they can compete with possibly school choice bills that's coming down. And guess what? There's another one coming tomorrow. Get ready for that.
There it is.
Well, if at first you don't succeed, well, just try again and again and again. And I think there's a W.C. Fields quote about that. That seems to be this year's lawmaker motto at the State House, though. Something didn't work last year or even last week. Can't take no for an answer. Just tweak it or not and bring it back again. We're talking about things like limiting Idaho's initiative process and making mask mandates verboten. Joe Paris is talking about it as well.
Stage Wednesday morning. 2 ideas printed that would change how the voter initiative process works in Idaho. First, in the Senate State Affairs Committee, a proposal to change the state constitution. The idea touches on the signature gathering campaign needed to qualify a citizen question to the ballot. Right now, the requirement is signatures from 6% of registered voters in 18 of the 35 legislative districts. The proposal asks Idahoans to sign off on an increase.
To increase the number of districts that require 6% signature threshold from 18 to 35.
If the idea clears the State House, the joint resolution would be a question on the November 2026 ballot. So it is up to the people. Why? In short, from Senator Doug O'Conowitz,
Requirement to all districts, nobody gets ignored.
this is a similar concept to a law passed in 2021 that was ultimately struck down by the Idaho Supreme Court as unconstitutional. So the logic here is, if a law is unconstitutional, change the Constitution. The idea was printed, and we'll see a full hearing soon. Sticking with the initiative process, Representative Bruce Gogg wants to see parity between the legislative and citizen lawmaking process. His pitch: give the governor veto power on a successful citizen initiative, similar to the governor's power with laws that are created by the legislature. The catch is, the governor could only veto if the initiative passes with less than a 2/3 majority.
If the governor vetoes it and it's a 52% vote or 54% vote, then it's dead. The override option for the electorate is to have passed it by 2/3 in the first place.
If the governor does veto it, there is opportunity for the citizens to try again.
So the veto by the governor possible is a good protection for a misinformed electorate if they don't get the information like we get to have. I think it's fair.
Concept was approved for a full committee hearing soon. To the House floor, lawmakers took a final vote on a topic we've seen plenty of times over the years: banning mask mandates. The idea centers on every person making a decision for themselves.
Any government officials are free to speak their mind, advise, recommend, suggest, any of those methods. They'll still be able to communicate with us. So to me, they just got to treat us like adults and ask us to buy in on it. They just can't force us by threatening us with jail time or prohibitive fines.
An argument against the idea: this would take away local control.
We pass a bill like this, and who knows what we may be facing in the future at the local level. Right now, there's an outbreak of tuberculosis in the center part of our country, and masks are being recommended to protect those people.
Legislation passed with a strong majority in the House. It now heads to the Senate. Also, something we're keeping track of, there is a memorial basically out there that would have lawmakers forfeit the pay raise that was approved last fall by a citizens committee. There's been a lot of conversation about it, but the clock is ticking. They have until the end of business on the 25th day of the legislature, which, Brian, works out to be this Friday.
Yep.
We will see if lawmakers in the House will do what the Senate already did and say no thanks to the pay raise.
Let me get this straight. Skog tried to introduce a bill earlier in this session that tried to raise that threshold to 60%. That didn't go anywhere, so now he's trying to circumvent that by saying, well, if it doesn't reach that, the governor can just veto it. So in essence, still raising that threshold to 60%.
Correct, and that piece of legislation, House Bill 2 from Representative Skog, it's still technically in play, but we have not seen any motion on it in weeks, I suppose.
All right, yep, thank you very much, Joe. Well, a bill that isn't really clear on what it's doing or asking of schools, and without any enforcement, well, it's clearly on a path to passage. And another needs a bit of reworking before it can move forward. Aspen Shumpert tells us about flags and the AG and a little legislative break for the Lunar New Year in today's 411.
We need to come back, get our students back, embracing the commitment to this country.
We have a lot of wonderful teachers that are trying to teach history. 2 Republicans voting no wasn't enough to move the needle on passing the controversial bill banning most flags in public schools yesterday. In a 59-11 vote, lawmakers approved legislation that prohibits flags representing political viewpoints, including political parties, race, sexual orientation, and gender. Bill sponsor Representative Ted Hill claims the measure would eliminate classroom distractions. However, Democratic opponents argue the legislation is unnecessary, pointing to existing state laws that already address classroom conduct. The bill now moves to the Senate.
The reality of corruption is that it doesn't necessarily stay within one jurisdiction, that it can be coordinated, and that we do need some type of mechanism to handle it.
A heavy-handed attorney can scare people into setting policy. And I've seen that many times in little towns and little highway districts.
The House bill expanding the Attorney General's power to investigate and prosecute city officials got a lot of scrutiny in Senate State Affairs on Monday. The committee wants the bill to have a process in place before the Attorney General can come in and investigate on the local level. So they voted to send it back to get revisions. Happy Lunar New Year. Festivities begin today and run through February 12th, ushering in the Year of the Snake. Unlike the Western calendar's fixed 365 days, this celebration follows a lunar calendar based on the moon's 12 phases, spanning 354 days. The 15-day festival is widely celebrated across Asia, but you can also celebrate right here in Boise. This Saturday from 10 to 4 at Jump, the Idaho Chinese organization is hosting a Lunar New Year celebration. Enjoy Chinese calligraphy, traditional crafts, treats, and more. The event is free, or you can donate to receive a small gift. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Aspen Shumpert.
Today marks the anniversary of the deadliest military massacre of Native Americans in U.S. history. And it's something the Shoshone hope you will always remember. That is, if you ever heard about it before today. What other history do you want us to keep alive? Let us know so we could possibly do a story on it in another edition of the 208. Text us, 208-321-5614. As always, include your name and the hashtag the 208. Oh, and if you have something to talk about today, you can do that too. To mention Sand Creek or the Washita River or Wounded Knee Creek, would you know what those three places have in common? Other than being bodies of water, they were the sites of some of America's most deadly Native American massacres. 130 Cheyenne and Arapaho killed in the Sand Creek Massacre in Colorado in 1864. 103 more killed in the Washita River Massacre in Oklahoma in 1868, and 150 Lakota Sioux in the Wounded Knee Massacre in South Dakota in 1890. But you could add up all of those Native American deaths, and it still wouldn't equal the number of Shoshone slaughtered in Idaho on this day 162 years ago. But the Bear River Massacre of 1863 likely doesn't come to mind when one thinks of notorious battles in our Indian War period, mostly because it happened at the near height of the Civil War, but also it wasn't exactly a proud moment for the U.S. military. The Shoshone tribe once spread their 17,000 people across parts of Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, and of course, Idaho. They moved with the seasons, and in wintertime, many of them would settle into the Cache Valley, which goes roughly from Logan, Utah, and into and around Preston, Idaho, because that's where the deer and the elk would go, and there was a river filled with fish. The Bear River, the Big River, they called it, or actually Boa Ogai. It was along that river on January 29th, 1863, where nearly 300 infantry and cavalry found a band of Shoshone led by Chief Sagwitch. They attacked without warning, shooting the Shoshone down like sheep in what would become the deadliest such attack in our nation's history. It was 1862. The Civil War was working its way to a crescendo, its biggest battles still ahead. Out west and out of the action, California's 3rd Regiment Volunteer Infantry was sent eastward to Utah, not to fight for the Union, but to protect overland mail routes in the territory. And for one other reason, the federal government was worried the LDS Church would lead a secession from the Union.
So they were sent to babysit the Mormons. And look, they hated each other.
However, while establishing Fort Douglas outside Salt Lake City, the soldiers and saints found a common cause.
To combat the Native American problem.
That problem was centered in the Cache Valley, an area north in what is now Franklin County, Idaho, that piqued the interest of the pioneers for its plush resources.
The Saints came to the Cache Valley in 1855. 8 years later, there's thousands of them.
Outnumbered only by the head of cattle they brought with them to graze, they put up fences and hunted the same game as the Shoshone.
That depletion of resources really put an end to our people's way of life. It was the only way we knew how to live. But you take away a people's life, the only way they know how to live, and now what do? I tell people we had 3 options: beg for food, starve, or steal. And I'm sure they did all 3.
Thus, the Native American problem. The solution: send in the 3rd Regiment. On January 24th, 275 members marched north under the command of Colonel Patrick Connor.
When Connor left Salt Lake City, he had arrest warrants in his hand for the chiefs, Pocatello, Sagwitch, and Bear Hunter. He said, I'm not going up there to arrest anyone. I'm not going to deprive my men a little fun of Indian killing.
Colonel Connor said as much in his report to U.S. Army Command nearly 2 weeks later, saying, despite the stated purpose of his orders, Connor informed the marshal that it was not my intention to take any prisoners, but that he could accompany me.
So he knew exactly in his mind what he was going to do, and he actually did it.
The regiment found the Shoshone hunkered down in their winter camp along the Bear River. At daylight, on January 29th, 1863, they attacked the 75 Lodge village. The Shoshone that could ran toward the icy river. The massacre lasted about 4 hours. 14 Army soldiers were killed. The Shoshone deaths numbered in the hundreds.
3 Mormon men at the direction of Brigham Young went in the next day to look for survivors and count the dead. And they both had counts over, all of them had counts of over 450, which they wrote down in their journals and then a report back to Brigham Young. And they said 2/3 of that number were women and children.
Only 150 Shoshone survived that morning, including Darren Perry's great-great-grandfather.
So I am a direct descendant of Sagwitch. He had a son named Yeager who survived the massacre as a 12-year-old by playing dead. My grandmother sat at his feet on many occasions and heard the story over and over. My grandmother's name was May Timbimbu Perry.
The Bear River Massacre remains the deadliest attack on Native Americans in U.S. history, and not really well known. Why do you think it's taken so long to kind of get this attention, or that it isn't as well known as you probably would like it to be?
I think early on that historians have said that, well, it was during the Civil War and just the news. There wasn't any news outlets out here other than the Deseret News, which they're not going to report on what happened. And I mean, it was kind of a black eye for the locals here. I had an old woman here in Cache Valley one day tell me that when I was a little girl, my great-grandfather told me never to talk about it. And so, I think the local saints felt a little guilt by having the Army come take care of the Indian problem, realizing now what that really meant. They weren't proud of it, and they have some responsibility in it. And so you just never really talk about it.
I guess that's probably why your grandmother and yourself feel it is important to tell this story.
It is important, especially in today's world we live in. Look, we're all going to go through hard things. We're all going to go through things that are hard to discuss and talk about. That one terrible event shouldn't define us. And I want people to know, you can talk about something hard, but then let's talk about what we can do together to make this world a better place.
Which is what Darren is doing now. He spends most of his time continuing the legacy his grandmother started by making sure the complete history of this massacre, from his ancestors' perspective, is told. And a lot of people are picking up on that. Today, several gathered at the Bear River site to commemorate the anniversary of that attack. They even shared a proclamation sent by Idaho Governor Brad Little today. Worth noting, the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation did buy the massacre site, but that wasn't until 2018, 2 years after the exact site of the massacre was located by an Idaho historian and a team from Utah State University. They used modern technology and maps that were drawn by the soldiers who participated in the 1863 attack. It kind of has moved over the years because that river has kind of, well, shifted a bit. Darren says they consider it sacred burial ground now, and there are 2 projects underway to preserve it. Since 2013, they've been trying to restore the land to its pre-massacre days, before pioneer and modern farmers destroyed the ecosystem. Their other goal is to eventually build an interpretive center on the site, complete with an amphitheater located below the ridge. But that project's been delayed a bit due to construction costs. 5 years ago, they were quoted a price of about $7 million, but those costs now are about 2 times that much. And they've only been able to raise about $1 million so far.
Here is your weather in a nutshell. It's a live look around the region. Boise sitting at 39 right now. Clear skies across the region. 36 in Twin and Sun Valley, 21. A little warmer in McCall at 26. Here's a look at the major headlines. So we do see a winter weather warning in Boise and the West Central Mountains that kicks off Friday morning and extends through Saturday night. Now Friday through Monday, we are expecting between 1 to 3 feet of snow at 4,500 feet and above, including Bogus Basin. And last, Boise is going to end January with a 6-day rain snow spree, and it's going to be pretty windy on Friday. Here's a look at the low temps tomorrow, waking up to 18 in Boise, 12 in Mountain Home, 5 in McCall, -6 in Stanley. In Twin Falls, looking at 15 and 14 for the low in Jerome. Moving on, here's now a look at your 7-day forecast. So we had a major shift in the weather pattern. It's going to kick off on Friday with a rain-snow mix, strong breeze here in Boise with a high of 38. Saturday and Sunday, the story there is mainly rain, with Sunday throwing us a curveball of a rain-snow mix later into the afternoon with a high of 44. And we see that rain continuing Monday through Wednesday, when again we get another curveball with a rain-snow mix and a high of 42 on Wednesday.
Let's get to your comments today. We had several comments about some of these bills going through the legislature, like this one for today. It's a good bill. I'm not sure who sent this one in, but says it has not been proven that a mask prohibits the spread of germs and disease. And we had somebody text in about this the other day, comparing us to Japan. And let me do that really quickly. Japan has a population of about 124.5 million people. They had 33 million cases of COVID, 74,000 deaths. America, on the other hand, about, 3 times as many in the population, 335 million. We had 111 million cases of COVID with 1.2 million deaths from COVID. So that's how somebody else kind of compares the difference between masks and no masks, because Japan was one of the last countries to lift their mask requirements. So there you go. So I'm gathering not having a mask mandate is more important than protecting people from another possible outbreak. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, says B&B in Nampa. That's true. It's kind of an argument against it. Why put us in a position where we don't have something that possibly could help a situation? Legislators worried that the electorate could be misled in a proposition election. They don't seem to have the same concerns of voters being misled in elections for politicians in the state, says Phil in Boise. And the concern is somebody being misled. Well, that didn't prove that way with Prop 1, did it? They kind of voted how most of Idaho wanted them to.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.